Now, Bonnie, tell me what exactly is Viking knit and how did you get involved in this?
Viking knit's a way of making chains with metal, and so I'm right now I'm at home with COVID and I can't do my other activities, so I decided I would go back to something that I learned a few years ago with a friend, Barb, and started making some jewelry using this Viking knit. So it's a
And
knitting process with wire, with silver wire, any kind of wire.
so tell me, what does it look like?
Well, can I show you?
Sure.
I have some slides here to show. I'll share my screen. I don't think I'm right in the slideshow yet, though. I want to make sure I want to mention that I am part of Artsphere in the Comox Valley, and this is what Viking knit looks like. It's a way of making chains, which you can use in various jewelry items. So it's an old Viking technique, and it's easy to learn in the Comox Valley. And this is what Viking knit looks like. It's a way of making chains, which you can use in various jewelry items. So it's an old Viking technique, and it's easy to learn, and it gives you a lovely chain, which you can use for various purposes.
Now, it looks quite complicated. So, how long would it take you to make a bracelet, say?
Oh, now it depends how long you want to make it. Um, so it doesn't take that long once you get comfortable with it. It takes a little while to get comfortable because you're using quite light wire, quite high gauge wire, so it bends quite easily. So it just a little bit of getting used to.
Are you able to show us at all or demonstrate, or how would somebody learn how to do this?
Well, that's what I'm going to show you.
Excellent.
And so if we're going to talk about what you need to start with. And one of the things you need is a piece of ruler, cardboard, or a small plastic card. And as you can see, I use my Vancouver Island library card. So there are many of these things you can have at home, right? So you need a piece of card. Don't worry about the wire at the moment. Either a pencil or a piece of doweling. And you need some wire, and you can get different kinds of wire and different prices. Here you need a 24 gauge. I would suggest you start with a 24 gauge for the base, and the rest of these wires are all 26 gauge. They could be 26 or 28. The higher the gauge, the finer the wire, and the lighter the wire. So it makes it softer and easier to work with. So 24 gauge for the base and 26. And you can see these are craft wire. If you get, here is a non-tarnishable silver plated wire. You can get pricier and pricier. I mean, if you use full silver wire today, it's very expensive, right?
So, you're not actually using knitting needles.
No, you're not using any kind of knitting needle, but you are working with the wire it looks like weaving with the wire more. Then you're also using a draw plate. And over here, I made this draw plate with my husband's tools, and my husband helping me. It's just a piece of wood. And these are millimeter size holes. This is a 12 millimeter, 11, 9, 7, 6, 5, 3, and 4 and 3. So you're going to be eventually pulling your knit through these holes to make it smaller and smaller. You also need a few tools like a darning needle that you might have at home, or a toothpick, or I have a bead reamer. And what you're going to use is sometimes the wire gets close so tight that you just have to lift it up a little bit to get the next piece of wire through. That's what you use those for. And you do need a few tools. You don't need all these tools. I'm just showing you what kinds of tools. These are wire cutters. You need a wire cutter of some kind. Your husband might have a little wire cutter somewhere for if he does any kind of electrical work. But this one is better, has got a spring in it. It's a little better for heavier gauge, and this is for lighter gauge. And you need, I like this particularly, this is a nylon flat nose plier, and because this is light wire, it can get twisted a little bit, and this helps you to straighten it out. These are bent chain nose pliers, and they're handy to reach in and get a hold of the wire when you're weaving it through. Flat chain nose pliers, and they're flat on the inside. So anyone, you need something to cut, you need something to pull with. You can use these to pull with too, and you can use these to flatten. So a couple of those would be, one of each of those would be more than enough. This is some people, this, because you're going to maybe make some jewelry after, you want to be able to make loops and things. That's why you would like the round nose plier. And this is the most important thing. You need safety glasses. Okay, and I got these at Midland Tools. They had a sale on one day, a friend mentioned, and so they have magnification at the bottom part here. And this is 2.5 magnification. I don't need any kind of eyeglasses to read. I need them for distance, but I don't need them to read. But I do find that magnification helps.
Why do you need safety glasses? You're not burning anything.
No, but you're pulling quite lengthy pieces of wire, and you don't want to hit yourself in the eye at all.
Okay.
You always want to work with some safety glasses of some kind. Protect your eyes. And so these are some local suppliers of these materials, or a lot of those things, as I mentioned, you could get in your own home. You could find them in your own home, right? Shipwreck Beads on 5th Street has a lot of the craft wire, but they have some better wire too. And Eagle Jam and Gifts is another place. It's right on Cliff Street. It's a rock place, but it also has some very good tools in there, and they have lots of wire and things like that. And then Midland is where I got those safety glasses. Canadian Tire actually is another place to look for tools. They have good sales. So, and then these are some other suppliers that I have used at different times. There's a place in Duncan and several places in Victoria and a couple places in Vancouver. So they're good for a variety of different tools and beads and supplies, silver, wires, and so on. So we're going to talk about how to start this whole project. So the first thing you have to make is a bunch. And this is a bunch with prongs on it. And it's what you're going to start looping through. So to make one of those, you have to wind the wire around the card 5 or 6 times, because you're making 5 or 6 loops. And then you're going to cut off the piece of wire, leave one piece a little long, because you're going to use it to wrap around to make your bunch, to hold it tight. And leave one end longer, because the prongs are longer at one end, because and pull them back, spread them out, and you put them over the end of the pencil or the doweling, whichever. And that, to hold them there, if you use doweling, I wanted to mention, you don't have the edge of your pencil with the 6 sides. So you need to make lines just to give you a guideline down your doweling to make sure, help you keep it straight. It's not a big problem if it doesn't. It will, it's very forgiving. That's one thing when you pull it through the wood piece. You have to tape that in onto the doweling. So use a piece of Scotch tape there to hold it in place, that's all. So that's the first thing. You have to start by making this bunch. The next thing is to make your base. And this is what the base will look like when you're finished. You notice it's attached to the bunch, the loops on the bunch. You're going to make the base with the heavier wire, the 24 gauge wire. You've made it with the 24. And so you've taken a piece, taken off, and you're going to insert it underneath one of these prongs. And here's an example of where the prong was so tight to the doweling, I had to lift it with the needle. What you do is you always start on the right. You pull the wire through and underneath the loop that's there, the prong, and then you pull it from right to left through the prong, under the prong, and then you keep pulling it till you're almost at the end of your 2-foot piece of wire. Okay? And you leave about a 1/2 inch of the wire left. Okay, so you're pulling it through and you've got about a little 1/2 inch left. And then what you do is you pull the wire down and over the base and back to the right. So you're making a loop. Okay. So you're going through the prong to start with. You're going under through the prong, pull it back and make a loop. And then you go over to the right, continue over to the right of your base, continue on to the next prong coming down on your doweling, and you pull that wire up. This is the bottom of the end of it. It's going off to the right because remember it's 2 feet long and it's coming back. So this is the top of it coming through underneath your prong. And then you pull it around. You pull it around and come back. Pull it around and come back. So this one was the next step actually. This time you've gone all the way around the whole of all of the prongs. So you've made a loop through all of the prongs, all the way around the 5 or 6 prongs that you had. Now, instead of going, there's no prongs left, you've already made a loop. So you go behind you go behind the loop. Do you see where the 2 pieces of wire come together?
Mm-hmm.
Here? That's the end of the loop, like you've made a loop. So now you're going behind that loop and around and back. And so you just keep doing it. So it ends up with all of these, they look like knitting stitches, right?
Right, they do.
Yeah. And that's your base. You haven't even started your item yet, but you created your base that you're going to attach to. But essentially, it's doing exactly the same thing, but with your better wire. When you're finished, you've gone all the way around and around until you've used up your 2 feet. See, it doesn't make a lot, right? That 2 feet of wire. Just remember, though, that when you eventually pull it through the board, it will actually stretch twice as long. So for every inch, it's going to be 2 inches when you're finished. Okay, remember, you want to leave a little tail at the end because you want to eventually weave that piece together into the next piece. So this is what the good wire will look like. There it's more a silver wire that I use, a little bit better wire. And it's the finer, it's actually the 26 gauge wire. So again, you start, now you already have loops there. You didn't have to, you don't have to start the same way as you did at the top. Here you just go behind, you get your 26, 28 gauge, you go behind the loop. And then you've got your 1/2 inch hanging down here. So you're going to, this is the last 1/2 inch, right, of your wire. Remember your wire is 2 or 3 feet long. You've pulled it all the way through underneath. and you've left a little 1/2 inch hanging down because you're weaving it into the previous piece of wire. Okay. Now you pull it back over top of the piece that you left hanging down. So you've made a loop. You went underneath, around, and you've made a loop. You're coming back.
So Bonnie, this looks a bit time consuming. How long did it actually take you to make your very first bracelet?
Probably my first bracelet took a little longer. I don't really remember because it was a while ago, but I remember that Barb and I struggled a bit. You know, we struggled a bit. But it's sort of like learning to knit, right? It takes a while to learn.
And what's your end product? What does that look like?
Okay. Do you want to see that right now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this whole demonstration goes through. So
Okay.
that's the end of one piece. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then I have to, I decided that wasn't long enough, so I did some more. But you have to take it off. I want to show you what it is to take it off the wire. You have to take it off the pencil or the doweling. And to do that, you have to cut it. Okay, you have to cut, don't cut your good wire, cut the base wire, the last row of the base wire to remove it from your base. Okay, so I use my cutters. I cut that. This was connected a minute ago. This was connected. I cut it off and I removed it. I left that piece on there and I just removed this piece off the end. Okay, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've made it so tight. You don't have to make those loops tight, but sometimes the loops have made it so tight it sticks to your pencil and you have to pull the whole thing off and then cut it. Okay, but you do have to remove that beginning piece. Now we have our Viking knit. We put this piece of wire through and put it through all of those little loops because you're going to pull and you're making this much smaller as you pull it through the board. So you want to make sure you've captured all your loops. Otherwise you can end up with it stretching wrong for you. So
Okay.
just use a piece of scrap wire for the handle. And I had measured it to start with. I just used my design board, but you could just use a ruler or whatever, just so you get a sense of how it's changing the size. So it's 1.5 each direction. So this is a 3-inch piece that I started with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pulled it through my draw plate. I pulled it through the holes in my draw plate. And usually I pull them a couple times just to make sure it's even all the way through. And I use my pliers here to pull it through.
So you're basically stretching it out.
Exactly. That's exactly. You're stretching it and you're making it thinner.
Okay.
And so I did that with several holes. And now instead of this being 1.5 on this side or 3 inches, it's now 2.5. So it's about 5 inches. It still isn't quite the length I wanted it. So I went back and I stretched in the next smaller hole. And that made it the length I wanted, 3 inches. And so what did I do with it after that? I've got my piece of silver. I've got it done. I made a bracelet. And this is the bracelet I made down here. See, this Viking knit is all the way around. And it's my bracelet.
So the piece that you started with, is that your starter piece for everything else that you do from then on?
Well, not necessarily, but I in these cases these are much smaller ones that I've used here. You know, I started with smaller and I gradually work up. Some people actually make a full necklace. They go the full length and make your necklace. And so now it maybe would take me 3/4 of an hour to an hour to make that. So
that's very fast compared. It looked quite complicated.
But it's a repetition, right? You're repeating yourself over and over and over. So it looks complicated to start with, but once you get going, it's just, it can be, I can watch TV and do it. It's sort of like knitting, right? I can't do it, but my mother used to knit there all the time. And so it's a similar kind of thing. And these are some sites that you can go to if you wish to watch some YouTubes or to read some other examples of how this last one is kind of a fun place. It's Instructables. You go there, and then it's a place where all kinds of projects are. And then over at the right, you type in what you're searching for in that published site, and you'll come up with a number of examples of Viking knit projects, and you can see what the final project is, and then you can click on one, and they'll either give you a YouTube or they'll give you write out how they did it, examples.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bonnie. That has been amazing. So, with your time during COVID, you've actually come up with some productive ways to use it.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm having fun doing it anyways. It's been a great way to spend the time.
So, if you'd like to learn more, you can follow these resources, and you too can have some wonderful jewelry. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Judi. Bye now.
Bye bye.